Bang, you are in the video game gang, or in this case, you're in the comic book gang. What's up, y'all? This is your boy Skip, aka Skipintosh, and this is the Krakoacast episode. I want to say this is episode number 9. It might be number 8 because we did skip a week and combine a few together, but whichever one it is, the time is now. The place is here. Mr. What's Up Pizzas, Corey Vincent, how are you?
I am shook.
To your core?
To my core. Okay, so last week I was shook. Okay, so if we're setting the bar, yeah, okay. Not shook this time as much as I'm confused. Right. So I'm so glad we get to talk through this because I need an adult.
Well, luckily you have an adult with you. You have 2 of them because you yourself are one. But we will come together and try to make sense of this whole thing. But before we dive in, as always, we want to pay respects and give praises where respects and praises is due. So this show is possible because of Oblivion Comics and Coffee. Oblivion Comics and Coffee is a shop, comic book shop / coffee shop in downtown Sacramento, right across the street from the cathedral on K Street. You can go in there, you can get this book, you can get yourself a fancy sandwich, a nice drink or beverage.
Beer even.
Yeah. Now here's the key thing though. If you go in there and you mention this little old podcast, this little humble podcast called Video Game Bang, you will get 10% off of your purchase and you will be given one of these stickers here. So bang, bang, get yourself in the Video Game Gang, get 10% off of your purchase, except alcohol. And you can get 10% off of this book. And let me tell you, just put this book, just start a saver. Go down there, start a saver. When the book comes out, they'll pull it for you so it's no one goes and grabs your copies. Corey, you started a saver. How's it been for you?
If I can do it, anybody can do it. Now, I had tons of savers before. I just didn't really read them. But, yeah, no, this one is one where most of the time kind of savers are optional. It's like, yeah, more than likely, you know, if they'll have that book there. This one, it's not optional. If you want to read it and you want the first print, you have to get your saver going. So don't even give them the option, Kurt. Just tell them, get the if you're gonna read this, get the saver, dummy.
If you're gonna read this, you better get the saver, and you get it from Oblivion Comics and Coffee.
Correct.
The Bang Toast is dope too, so shout out to Lost Sheep in the chat talking about the Bang Toast. I miss the Bang Toast.
I do. It'll come back someday. Popular demand.
Popular demand. So y'all keep requesting it, but the VGB Sunrise is fantastic. I literally get one every time I go in there.
I saw you. You came in to help us for trivia night.
Yep.
Holding it down, and you had the VGB Sunrise in one hand.
Absolutely.
Big old smile on your face, man.
That's right, man. The VGB Sunrise. I mean, think about a sunrise. It just encourages smiles. So make sure you guys, when you go in, get yourself our official drink, the VGB Sunrise. Mention Video Game Bang. Get 10% off of your purchase. Show Laura, Neil, Ryan, Jason. Show them all some love. And once you do that, pull out the Twitch app. Go to Video Game _Bang. And watch this episode, because this book, Powers of 10, number 4. It was a bit perplexing, and I can understand why you felt that way, Corey. After me reading it through, you read it first, I read it after, and when I came in, when I walked through the doors, you were like, "Oh man, Kurt, this one's confusing." I was like, "Ooh, I want to read it. I want to read it." Like Jonathan Hickman is such a fantastic writer to me. The weirdest and oddest places that he goes, I want to go.
Yeah.
On top of this book, I'm currently reading his Shield series that he did, and he has Shield being started by like Leonardo da Vinci, and like Aristotle's a part of it, and it's incredible. And Galactus shows up like way back then, and they have to thwart him off. His concepts and how he uses like actual history and ties it in, and he uses the truth and tweaks it to make us question. I just love that type of stuff. It's so cerebral.
Yeah.
But you know, hey, we come into this book, Powers of 10, number 3. We had come off of pretty much leading into and knowing that Mr. Sinister was coming sometime soon.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we don't have to wait very long in this issue before he shows up.
Yeah, we're starting at X0, so this is the year 1 X-Men group. This is the one where my theory is that this is all that's going to be left, and this is what's going to spawn into the modern X-Men franchise of comic books. Is that pretty much, is that like, oh, no shit, Corey, or is that
no, I don't think it is. Like, I think it's a good theory, because with this timeline mixed with what we're looking at in X to the Third Powers timeline and the Phalanx and everything and Ascension, like those are the two left where I can't exactly say I know where there's a going. So your theory on this one, I'm leaning towards. It makes sense to me. It's just that I am still so intrigued and excited, but clueless about what's going on with the phalanx and the people in year 1000.
Yeah, which we get to see in this one, which is pretty cool. But as you had said, we start off in X0, year 1, with Xavier, the more traditional, like the one that reminds me the most of the 90s cartoon, big yellow chair, in the suit and stuff, with, a very similar Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
And they are approaching this giant, what is it, like a ruby place, like a giant crystal fortress?
Yeah, it did look like a crystal fortress. And being that, Mr. Sinister has the red diamond right there in the middle of his head, it seems like it was some sort of extension of that. If it is an official place that had been in prior comics, I would not be privy to it. So I'm going off the fact that it was modeled after the red diamond in Mr. Sinister's head. And
they walk up to this guard who looks like Mr. Sinister. He takes off his helmet, and so I'm like, oh wow, we're in this. There's Mr. Sinister, and he's being kind of a dick, and he's standing up to Magneto and Xavier, like, and I'm not going to let you guys through. And then Magneto just bodies him.
Yeah, out the gate. And that's what I loved about it. I love that he was, like, we saw that version of Sinister, the doorman Sinister, trying to be diplomatic and explain things. And pretty much once Magneto saw that this guy's not trying to let us go through, he pretty much dispatched him.
Yeah.
Which was pretty funny. And then, of course, we go through, and that's when we get introduced to a version of Mr. Sinister that most of us have not seen before. But to me, it immediately makes sense with Nathaniel Essex, a.k.a. Mr. Sinister, being one who likes to tinker with the gene pool. Well, what's one of the natural things that people like to do with genes? And, has been a topic of debate within the last decade or 2 decades. Cloning.
Yeah.
So it made perfect sense to me, but what were your impressions when they walked in and you saw those versions of Mr. Sinister?
I was still trying to figure it all out because, like, there was, the Sinister guy on the throne who obviously, you're thinking, okay, he's on a throne. He's in a position of power. This is Mr. Sinister. Dope. And then he's got this guy next to him who also kind of looks like him, but with funny facial hair and looks kind of like a butler type of guy, where it's got like enough resemblance where it could be another Sinister. So I'm still, at this point, this is why I was reading every panel like 3 or 4 times. I genuinely had no clue what I was looking at. Is this like, is Sinister a species now, or is this just a bunch of clones? I was lost.
And that's kind of the thing. So Jonathan Hickman, as you have to ask the questions and you have to pose the questions to make the reader think, and then later down the line you give them the answers. But what Hickman does is he will let questions linger for a while. He will answer them, but he will let questions linger for a while. So you get in the mode of starting to be okay with a little ambiguity and just kind of knowing like, hey, I may not fully understand this part, especially when we got nonlinear storytelling going on, but you just need to understand the times, understand the message being shown there. And basically what it is Xavier and Magneto are seeking Mr. Sinister from everything that we've seen, and he's already been involved in creating the Chimera and all that stuff, but it seems like this time around, with the new knowledge that they have, they're going to approach him and they're going to work with him, but in a slightly different way. We just don't know what that slightly different way is yet.
Yeah, so just to confirm too, this is a different timeline from the one we had seen that ended up in like Extinction, right?
Where with the Cardinal and Rasputin fighting, the Sentinels and everything.
There was
and
4
Nimrod.
generations, and they ended up wiping out 40% of the mutant population. So with that knowledge, how that worked, they went in with a different approach, which we'll find out here in a minute.
We will. But we have them there in the throne room. I thought it was interesting too. I was just taking note and looking around how the guards that were standing around Mr. Sinister's throne, they had helmets very similar to the Juggernaut.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting as well. Now, if you know anything about the Juggernaut, where he gets his powers from is like this deep mystical thing. Ultimately, they did. He is a mutant, but where he gets his momentum and his running ability from, I think it's the Crimson Bands. Was it the Crimson Bands of Sidorak? No. I think those were...
It's some gem or like some crystal thing that makes him as powerful or as strong as he needs to be, I think is how it's worded.
Exactly. And which is interesting because, with them having those guards there with those, types of helmets that are very similar to him, I'm thinking that may play a role. But we have the different versions of Sinister there. We see that he's been manipulating with his own genes. They make a reference multiple times to him playing around with different mutant genes.
Well, this was like straight up comedy. Like, remember how we talked about at the beginning of the doorman gets beat up? And I think that's the same doorman that took him to Sinister. And it very comedically says 2 minutes later, after he, basically says, "I'll never take you in."
Oh, yeah, it
Crash
is.
through the wall.
Yep.
2 minutes later, "I present to you," and then you got this guy who's funnier looking, who's like, kind of, they say something about, "Oh, that's a cape." The Sinister on the throne. He's like, "Oh, that's a badass cape. Why don't I have a cape?"
Right.
And this snooty guy is like, "I've always thought you should have a cape." And then he's like, "Well, why haven't you said anything?" And then just murders the guy.
Yeah.
So
showing how sinister he is.
Yeah, just all these people are super expendable at this point and just comedic almost. And this is a way different pace from what we had saw in the last comic altogether, which was so sad.
Right.
So they way to just draw a complete contrast. If you read straight across, you have probably the most sad comic book in a long time, followed by this just nonsensical like comedy scene, which I liked. I thought it was good.
It's good pacing, and Jonathan Hickman, who I mean, obviously his material has been in 2 movies that grossed over $1 billion. I think he is showing his chops off here that, hey, I know how to pace a story. I know that it needs to be dynamic. I know after you need some levity after a very heavy issue with a very heavy mission with heavy losses. So this is Jonathan Hickman again, just showing that he's a master storyteller, from panel to panel, dialogue bubble to dialogue bubble, issue to issue. Now we are seeing these different versions of Mr. Sinister. Now, something that has been a reoccurring theme, this is a trope even in movies, when you want to show that someone's really a big bad and they don't care, they always, knock off someone next to them. We saw Nimrod do it. We see them do it. I want to say we saw one other person do it as well. But through this and the discussions, and ultimately Charles, saying, actually even what's his name, Magneto, saying, "Hey, I've seen the future. I know what it looks like," and ultimately even that Sinister was kind of flapping at the gums and not really, kind of talking himself in circles, essentially, and eventually gets to the point where he gets taken out too, and I think it's Magneto that takes him out, and then here comes another Sinister. Now this Sinister is closer to the.
I don't think it was Magneto. I think it was this Sinister.
Oh, it may have been. I think. I mean, you may very well be right.
See how he comes in on that other panel with a big cheesy smile on his face?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think it's just we saw one Sinister, and if they really thought that was the Sinister, like they wouldn't have just ripped his head off.
Right.
I don't even know if that's in Magneto's capabilities, unless he's like pulling the blood from his head to make it explode or whatever.
We've seen Magneto do some interesting things.
Yeah, Magneto works in mysterious ways.
Right. But with that version of Sinister dispatched, we see the one that we know closer to the 90s version, closer to the Jim Lee style X-Men cart animated series version. And
I didn't even notice this. He has a Glock in his hand.
Oh, there we go.
So
there it is. Yeah, and because the color scheme was so close, so there it is. So Mr. Sinister knocked off the other version of himself, walks in and pretty much, wants to hear what they have to say. And this version does have the cape.
Yeah.
Which, again, going back into the humor and, doing callbacks and everything. And then ultimately Charles just lets him know, like, hey, we got to, to really get this thing going, we got to, begin with, like, good work. We got to start at the base, and we've got to create a database of all mutant DNA, and some of the ones that are harder to acquire, I'll help you get.
Yep, and then what I thought was pretty interesting or cool, or the big takeaway from here, which I think is setting things up for later, is that they put the bug into his ear that they need him to basically, collect the mutant gene and organize it, when he doesn't have any interest in this anymore. Mm-hmm. But then before they leave, they erase every memory that they were ever there.
Yep.
So that Sinister will continue on with the plan that they're expecting now, which is for him to betray them in the 4th round or 3rd or 4th rounds of these mutant genes.
Right. Yeah. Create those hunters, or the hounds as they were called, which are basically mutants that their minds can't be read and they hunt other mutants.
Yeah.
From there, we come over to the Red Diamond infographic. This is one that Cory and I...
This is a head scratcher, man. This is crazy.
And I love it. It's almost like Jonathan Hickman kind of went off his rocker a little bit. But this is what happens when you don't put your voice into the character. You get into the character and find the character's voice. So it was a really interesting, like, little, it even says the Red Diamond, all the best news and gossip for Bar Sinister. So it just goes into, like, all of these different secrets. Now, this is the stuff that I love from Hickman, because this is the stuff that, it does make you scratch your head, but what I love about it is he is playing the role. He loves to inject and infuse the things that are hot in pop culture right now. He loves to use them against us. And this is, through the voice, this is how you're truly a transcendent writer. You don't use your voice inside of the character. You find the character's voice. But once you find the character's voice, then you can start to speak through the character in a very subtle way. He's just talking about all these different secrets, sinister secrets that Mr. Sinister has. Everything from red shoes that he's worn to being a trendsetter, and talking about being cut down in his prime. It's just basically all the different versions of himself is I believe what these are referencing to. So every time a version comes up and is the preeminent version and it gets bumped off or there's something significant about it, and I think Hickman was just taking an opportunity to really say, hey, each copy of Sinister was its own kind of individual thing. It was a spinoff of the copy, but those copies were still doing the work of Mr. Sinister. So while they were doing the work, some of the appearances that they were making, some of the two brothers jumped off of a plane for the longest time until he was discovered. Many wondered if there was a third. If I were to tell you there were more, would you believe me? Probably not. He does this thing where he infuses confusion.
Curt, how many of the Sinister Secrets were there?
There were 9.
I counted 10.
Oh, there is 10.
X.
Interesting.
Ha ha. And the 10th one is the one that is really the one, I think, of everything in this book, the biggest takeaway, because he says which brainwashed mutant Sinister, which had just happened in the panel beforehand, was replaced long before a certain bald somebody knew and has been in on the game for almost as long as the game was being played. Shh. So what that's saying to me is that one that they just brainwashed was another life model decoy, and there's an actual real Sinister somewhere who now knows that he's trying to be played.
Yep, absolutely.
That's crazy. And now we got to guess, does Xavier know that? Or no? Or is...
See?
Yeah.
This is the stuff that I love about Hickman. Every book that you read from Hickman, there's a little bit of this where you don't know. You don't know for certain.
Why would he tell you this unless there's another double cross? Is what I'm thinking. So and then
is he throwing you in a direction just to make you think that?
Exactly, because in the next episode he'll just kill everybody like he did last time. So
when we thought Nightcrawler was gonna bamf them all off the Blackbird.
Exactly.
So this is what I mean. Like, you can't predict what's going to happen, Cory. Most of the time I can. I read these books and I'm like, I know what's around that turn. I know what's around that corner. I never know with Jonathan Hickman. I never know. And this is the stuff that people enjoy about, what is his name?
George R.R. Martin. Yeah.
It's unpredictable. You don't know. But Hickman has been doing this since before Game of Thrones got popular. So I look forward to seeing him be a more popular figure in writing and pop culture as a whole, which he kind of technically is. People just don't know his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with the 10th Sinister being the one that got the information and can take it back to the original copy, we end that part of the story there. We go to X to the First Power, which is the X-Men months ago, so it's a little bit in the past, and we've got Cypher being taken to the island of Krakoa by Charles Xavier, and so something that we'll notice, and Cory, I'm sure you noticed this too, but there's a difference between the Xaviers that we're seeing. The Xavier that we just saw was in his hover chair. This Xavier is already walking around. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I can't tell you why. And in fact, you brought that up, and I wasn't even thinking about it, but this is the X1 version of him. This is the one that we're more used to seeing him with that big device, like the
10 years in,
like the Wi-Fi Cerebro.
Yeah,
that's what we think it is.
Right.
We technically don't know.
We don't know. Right.
But yeah. So in this one, he's been able to walk the whole time. We don't know why.
Right.
So I didn't even really recognize it until you had mentioned it. But what we're learning here is that this is a lot of stuff we've put together about how Cypher was interfacing, and we've seen like his command station in here before, but this is like the origins of that, where he first brings him here. He's all decked out with a very kind of cliche I'm on safari hat, you know. And then he's basically breaking it down like, and this was actually really cool to see how it happened. I'll let you kind of explain how like Cypher started to interface with it, and how like he was getting stuff out of it that Professor X couldn't even do.
So Cypher's mutant ability is technopathy. Basically, he can interface with technology on a... I don't believe he's an omega level mutant, but he can interface with technology in such a way that he can manipulate it, learn from it, teach it, and grow it and expand it. So Professor X essentially created a telepathic connection, since Krakoa, has some sentience, so therefore has its own, thoughts and feelings and everything. But that was almost like Cypher could tell after speaking with it and watching Professor X communicate with it. He was like, you're not getting like full sentences, you're getting like low resolution ideas of what he's saying. He said, I'm willing to bet that your communication is more empathic. That's why he's telling you how he feels, and very simple and basic things. And it was interesting that Professor X was like, yeah, this is true, like that's all I can gather from it, because it's just on a telepathic level. So Cypher naturally starts to listen more, and then reaches out and touches Krakoa. And we do see that Krakoa is personified with like a face and everything, kind of looking similar to like Ego the Living Planet, if any of our listeners and viewers have seen the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with Ego. So it kind of looks like that a little bit. And pretty much the connection and the communication that we saw Cypher already have with Krakoa and House of X #1, this is where all of that begins. And pretty much Charles Xavier is like, hey, it seems like you're starting to get a better understanding than me. That's exactly what I wanted to see. How long would it take you to create a system to where, that implant that gets put in there of how to understand Krakoa and the language and everything, how long will it take for you to understand Krakoa, create that infrastructure, and then make it up and running and available to everybody, because we're going to bring the mutants here. And Cypher tells him, hey, 6 months if everything goes smooth, but maybe a year if I suck at what I'm doing. And Professor X is like, awesome. So he throws Cypher a bag and pretty much just like leaves Cypher and Krakoa to their own devices.
I saw that. Yeah, he was just kind of like, all right, peace, dude, get to work.
Right.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I thought it was a little not that I don't it served a little kind of abrupt and everything, but at the same time, knowing Cypher like when Cypher's is faced with challenges, especially something like this in his area of expertise, he absolutely wants to do that. And also Professor X has the knowledge of the future at this time, as far as we know. So Cypher would already be on board to do whatever he needs to do for the success of the mutant race.
And one thing we kind of pick up is a little backstory of Krakoa, some more details that, I didn't know at the time. Because, as you were saying, Professor X could just talk to it on a primitive level, like, oh, Krakoa's mad or Krakoa's happy. Like, he's just reading the vibes.
Right.
This guy's going in and finding the backstories within seconds.
Yep.
And he starts finding out that before it was Krakoa, it was a different place called Okara. Mm-hmm. And something had happened, some ancient event. It's just kind of represented with a Sunder sword, basically, like a world-slaying sword comes through and divides it in half.
Yeah.
And basically, there's like an evil side of like demons flying in, and then Krakoa's just kind of out in the open to be destroyed.
Right.
Until a hero shows up that happens to be Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And the Horseman, which I kind of...
The first mutant.
Yeah, the first mutant. I don't know. They didn't really go into the details of why he showed up there and why he defended Krakoa and sealed the hole, basically. But regardless, he did. And then now Krakoa is its own independent spot and then sealed somewhere deep away, which we'll never, ever see again, because that's how comics work, is the other end, which is like the opposite. It's like the nether realm of Krakoa that is just filled with all sorts of demons and terrible, ugly things.
Exactly. And the like if I was gonna make some base assumptions, because we like to speculate here and get into predictions. My assumption is, since Krakoa is a mutant island and Apocalypse is the first mutant, it makes sense that the mutant island that the mutant would come from the mutant island ultimately, and that's probably why he was there to defend. Now the Four Horsemen I'm not sure of, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm starting to think, like, with all these biblical references and stuff from that, the two humans in the Garden of Adam and Eve and Ascension,
right,
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that also was playing a role. Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen, something's going on there. So Jonathan Hickman is one of those people where he will actually do something like that and he will come back to it. So let's see if this doesn't get touched up here in this book. Let's see if this is something that continues on in the X-Men book.
Yeah, for sure.
But after we find out the story of ultimately why Krakoa is sad, because Krakoa is sad because it was once two and now it is one, and it's lonely essentially. It yearns to be with that other part. The Araco, I believe is what it was called, or Aroka or something like that. It yearns to be with its other half, almost like a marriage. You know what I mean? Two people who have a fantastic union and then they're split up, in a traumatic event. And, though maybe both of them survive, ultimately what they long for is to be back with that other half. And as it sits now, that is not possible. Now, what's interesting, though, about that, and another reason why I think it's not going to stop there, is once we got past the parts where Professor X did finally leave, and then we got the current Krakoa system, and it was another infographic breaking things down. Krakoa interface built by Douglas Ramsey, aka Cypher, a translation program so that other mutants can interact with the island without needing Cypher to act as a go-between. And we had Sage, who was taking care of transit and monitoring. Defense and observation was being taken care of by Black Tom Cassidy. Secondary external systems was being taken care of by Trinary. And then Overwatch and data analysis was being taken care of by Beast, which we saw him down in the cave with Storm and Professor X when they were doing the communications with Marvel Girl and the rest of the crew for House of X, or House of X number 4.
And then the note at the bottom, it's got to pay dividends, or at least it's just laying the foundation for, curveballs and stuff to do. Who knows when? Maybe this will take place. It's as far as in the X-Men comics when they start coming out. But it said there's a note. While there's been no actual evidence of a Krakoan skunkworks existing, there are rumors of a massive subterranean laboratory where Forge is busy building biological machines that could possibly be used to manage a mutant expansion on the island.
I'm calling out a callback right now. When we first started talking about Omega level mutants in House of X number 1, one of the biggest things when they were comparing, they were talking about Cypher versus Forge. How Cypher's his ability, his technopathy goes farther beyond what humans can comprehend, where Forge's is on a more primitive level. And now they just brought up Forge again.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm telling you, Jonathan Hickman does these callbacks where stuff that, they just referenced Forge before, it comes up. Now, I will throw out, this isn't really a spoiler because it's not a spoiler at all. But, and this is a spoiler podcast anyway. But on one of these variant covers, I think for the next issue, Forge is on the cover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, that's part of the thing. We're kind of taking a tour of the X-Men history. So, like, trust me, before it's all said and done, Forge is going to be here, Cable's going to show up, and Bishop's going to be here. He's running back the hits. You know what I mean? We just had a mission with Cyclops and Marvel Girl and Wolverine and Nightcrawler. Like, we got them. Yeah. Like, he's going to keep running back the hits for us. We just got Mr. Sinister. So just keep an eye out for that. But that was one of the things I wanted to call out, was that callback that Hickman did. And then after we got this infographic, which has those things laid out and references Forge. And, by the way, Skunkworks. Cory, are you familiar with Skunkworks?
I do not know what that means.
No problem. So Skunkworks, there was a company, I forgot which company it was. It was a corporation. And while they were running, there was a secret company that got started within the company called Skunkworks. It was started off with a few people. They came up with an idea. They started working on it in between projects at work. And eventually that company within the company sprang out and overtook that company. And that's what Skunkworks is. So that black reading of what the Krakoa plant does with mutants, how the Krakoan tumor.
Yeah.
And remember how I said I think I think they're using the Krakoan tumor to grow mutants.
Yeah.
And it just talked about skunk works. Something on the inside that people aren't aware of is on the inside till it comes out, and Forge is down there.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I think he's going to put Sinister and Forge together this time to make the next batch of mutants for when the humans come and they wage war on Krakoa. Like, instead of thinking that there's just only 100 and something mutants left, they are going to crank those things out, and when one goes down, you're going to be able to grow another one and throw them out there.
Dang. Okay.
Anyway, so on that note,
good theory.
Thank you very much. We come over to X to the third power. This is X-Men the year 1000. This to me still is my favorite timeline out of all of them.
Is it really?
Oh,
This is the
easily.
one I hate because I don't know what the hell's happening.
And this is the one that
I'm
I love
confused.
because I know the least about it, and
Yeah.
and I'm willing to bet it's probably the most significant.
I agree. I think that's true. Because I think, and the big reason I think Zero is the one that's the main one that we're going to continue on with is because, you know, it's framed to make you believe that this is the most advanced in the future, when I really think this is the first one. Yeah. This might be the one that spun off 9, 8, and we're actually working backwards, you know, from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0.
Yeah, counting down instead of counting up. Maybe.
Yeah, I kind of think, and we see, you know, it's very technological future stuff. This is when they're, you know, trying to get ascension. Everybody's blue, and, you know, even Nimrod has been I think our theory was correct, is that the only way for him to adapt and survive was to be a servant.
Yep.
And now we get the conversation, actually, the Phalanx or
the Phalanx.
Phalanx is here, and we get some dialogue.
Yeah. We get some dialogue, and I love the Phalanx dialogue because it's all broken up and like kind of weird, like the way that they speak. But essentially, what's going on is, we don't even know what this race is called. Now, I believe it is just the mutant gene naturally progressing on and on and on and on and on. But we get this character that we don't truly know the name of. Seems to be representing mutants. This is the one that Nimrod, this version of Nimrod, has become a servant of, and they're speaking to the Phalanx, and basically, you know, the Phalanx, you know, they're saying, hey, you know, we know that you guys are going to take us over, and instead of us fighting against it, we want ascension, we want to go to the next level, so we are willing to interface with you and let you take us over. And ultimately that's and the Phalanx, you know, they're saying, hey, we hope this, and the Phalanx is like, we care little about hope, you know, you will ascend, basically saying, we don't care about what your hopes are, you will conform, you know. But they used ascend, you know, to keep them kind of on their side of like, oh yeah, this is what we want. Ultimately, what the person was saying is that, you know, we have an idea of what it might look like, but ultimately we can tolerate, you know, assimilating. We just can't tolerate going extinct. Essentially, is what he's saying. And we see and he's basically asking, you know, like, will you take our offer? Will you, you know, will you interface with us? And you see the Phalanx reach out and grab their information orb that the librarian from these people's texts these people's records had brought out, and the Phalanx grabs it. Ultimately, you know, kind of interfaces with it, puts its things inside of it, and then we see it go poof. Like, basically it consumed it and it's starting to process the data. And the Phalanx is saying, hey, you know, the guy is asking, did you consume us? Like, can you fill us? Can you feel us being a part of, you know, coming into you? And he was like, yeah, you know, anywhere that we are, you know, you now are. And at that point, he's just kind of checking to see if they took him right. Now, this was the part where I went from thinking, like, they really do just want to ascend and they're going to, like, join with the Phalanx and create some other thing with the Phalanx. But then I started to think, they're kind of tricking the Phalanx. They want the Phalanx to consume them, and then they're basically going to hack the Phalanx, and that's how they're going to ascend to a whole nother level, basically where they can be anywhere, because the Phalanx can just travel and be anywhere with its form. And I'm thinking that the mutant gene ultimately wants to do that. It wants to ascend to where it can be, like, omnipresent. Tell me a little bit more about this, Cory, and some of the things that kind of made your eyebrows go up.
I'm just going to throw a wild guess out there and say that this main blue dude who is representing the mutants is Professor X.
Yeah.
Just because in the first issue where it breaks down all the different timelines, everyone has turned out to be Professor X.
Except for Nimrod. What about Nimrod, though?
Oh,
Nimrod was in that as well, yeah.
Damn.
Yep.
There goes that theory.
Yeah.
Well, never mind.
Because I had that same theory, but it doesn't mean that it's not right. It's just, I mean, will Professor X going to Nimrod in order to survive?
Yeah,
Who knows? You know,
maybe
that's Professor X that's with them. Who knows? You know, I don't know.
I'm having the most difficult time wrapping my brain around this part. So to be honest, what I did is like read it.
Okay.
Read it twice. Read it 3 times.
Yeah.
Didn't get it and was like, all right, it will come. I just trust that, you know, with a little bit more time and a few more issues, I will get it. But at this point, I'm still struggling with it. And in fact, what you had just told me about what he did to that orb.
Yeah.
And now it triggered a few things to make more sense that there was like a red herring in there that they were using to try and deceive it. Yeah. And I didn't get that the first time. I was like, he just destroyed that ball to be a dick.
Right.
But now when I look at the art a little bit more, which maybe if I had a digital version and wasn't, you know, focusing on all the panels at once, you can really see that it's digging its like claws into it as like it's absorbing it rather than just destroying it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was basically like a ball of information, you know what I mean? And to me, I almost thought of it like this is if that was, because I wasn't thinking of this thing as being Professor X, but whether it is or it isn't, I'm thinking of it almost like the Moira scene where it's like, you know, read my mind, Charles, and he reads their mind and he sees everything. This is almost like them giving that information to the Phalanx in the way of the Phalanx can absorb it, and the Phalanx being like, I see now. Because one thing that I noticed most of the time, if you know anything about hacking or really like taking over controls of like another system, you know, whether it's like a software, hardware, or like
spyware.
Okay.
Is that where you're going?
Okay, we can even go there. So most of the time, in order to know that you've gotten in, they'll put something in there in order for it to repeat. It's almost like a relay. And you notice that when the Phalanx took it in, because the guy is talking, hey, if so, then you'll know the sequence, as I know the sequence. And between us, we the only two. So it's saying, hey, whatever you just consumed, you and I are the only ones that know it, and there's a sequence. Now, coding is sequential, right?
Yeah.
And then you hear the Phalanx say, there was a city on the mountain, and behind the sun, sure, brightly, then too brightly, as it expanded, to consume the city, the mountain, the world.
That was the code?
I think that's the relay message. That's the sequence.
Okay.
The sequence of events. Because think about Krakoa, Forge, the Skunk Works.
Oh.
There is a city. There is an island, a mountain, behind the sunshore. It's out there, brightly, and then too brightly, as it as it expanded. The tumor expanded.
Yeah. To consume the city.
The mountain, the world.
Okay. So this is some heavy shit.
Dude, this is why I love Hickman.
I read that part, like I said, 3 times, and it didn't like really jump out to me at all. Besides maybe just a code to be sure that they were, you know, because what you'd said before,
right.
like
just to verify, like they took the program.
Yeah.
Yep.
But now what I'm kind of thinking is, because it does seem a little deceitful, that maybe somewhere in that code is something to like corrupt it or like, because we like you said, we know computer programs work. That's how they work. They get you to click the link.
Yep.
I think they just got him to click the link.
Yeah, that's what happened. He clicked the link.
Yeah.
And they got in.
Yeah. And now, you know, if he doesn't, you know, run his antivirus very soon, they might have control over this.
Absolutely. And from what we see in the sequence, speaking of the sequence, the person says, so it worked. And we see the Phalanx go from their normal form to where they start having these sticks break out of them. And instead of being fully black and yellow, we see them turn more to black and gray. And then we see their form start to change. And he say, and from the Phalanx itself, you hear the Phalanx read back, yes, it worked. And then the lady helper, to who we think may or may not be Professor X, says, the question remains, yes. The question remains, and then he says, yes. Do you find this form, this conversion acceptable? And then you see that the Phalanx thing like starts to break apart, tear apart, and then reform. And then it says, await response, await answer. As if, yes, they have hacked the Phalanx and they are inside of the Phalanx now.
Whoa, okay. So what does it all mean, Curtis? We got 2 panels left. What were you supposed to take away from this, and what do you think's happening in the next one? I'm gonna tell you straight up, I can't even make a guess as to what's gonna happen after this one.
Some of what they're saying is that the Phalanx have the ability to integrate any machine intelligence into their collective, which after a period of time, if that intelligence is found useful, worthy, it will eventually ascend and be part of the greater collective. Subsumed into the empire. And then the other guy responds, clearly we know now they find us useful, which should be celebrated, but there you are, not celebrating at all, not one bit. And I think it's basically like as the concept and the idea of the Krakoa tumor expanding beyond, basically Mr. Sinister, the 10th Sinister, getting the information from the 9th Sinister and screwing things up anyway. And this time, instead of the mutants getting out of control, the Krakoa tumor itself starts to expand and consume the whole world. And this might be the timeline where basically they're like, hey, we need the Phalanx to come and consume that thing once it starts expanding. And that might be what they're going back and doing. And then from there, like I said, I swear I feel like it's going to go in a cycle, in a circle, where either A, the whole world is going to be mutants and it's going to be over the top like that, or B, it's going to go back and then ultimately it's going to consume it all and then turn it into like one crystallized like source of mutantdom or whatever, or abilities. But ultimately I think it's going to end in all of this stuff coming back to form the X gene. Okay. I feel like it's going to go in a cycle, and like all this stuff will be the reason that the X gene even began in the first place. But Jonathan Hickman's the master storyteller. I'm just trying to keep up, so I can't tell exactly how it's going to be.
All I know is that actually I'll be out of town when the next one comes out.
You will.
Oh, I'm bummed, dude.
Yep. So it's all right. I'll have to hold down the fort.
You'll be holding it down for me. I'm going on a little hiatus, a vacation.
Yes.
I'd like to say much needed, but I don't know. It's a crazy time, but it's good to go get relaxed. I'll be in Italy. Yeah. But next Wednesday, I know fondly, as I'm traversing the earth, I'll be thinking, God damn, what's happening in House of X? Because I want to know. God damn it! I've seen the cover. They show you the covers kind of in the book.
Yeah.
And what did you get from it?
I mean, I got.
It looks dark. It looks scary.
It looks very, very dark. And I mean, the next one is going to be a house book, and the house book seems to be the more emotional of the ones. So I think it's going to be emotional. Yeah, it's going to be pretty.
Storm looks like very upset. Like, oh yeah, she might be raging a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot of vengeance going on, and Emma Frost just looks like typical Emma Frost. Like,
yeah, but those are two ladies you do not want to piss off.
Yeah, so I'm excited, man. I hook, line, and sinker. I'm still convinced this is the best comic book out there right now.
I believe it, man, and the numbers are showing it. People are buying it in droves. You've got to get a pull list if you want to get the first print. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting for a second and a third, and on the resale, they won't be worth as much. But it's still art. It's still awesome. The covers are incredible. Cory's holding up one of the variant covers of the last panel of House of X #1. Go down to Oblivion Comics and Coffee and pick it up. Start the pull list. Next week it will be me. I will see if I can find a guest, but if not, I'll hold it down by myself. No biggie. Thank you so much again to Oblivion Comics and Coffee for sponsoring this show. You guys make sure that you tune into the regular Video Game Bang show, videogame_bang on Twitch. Wednesdays and Saturdays, covering an array of topics in the video game and nerddom industry interest group. Other than that, man, I'm just really enjoying this book, and I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. Make sure you go out and pick it up. Continue to read along with us. For my man, What's Up Pizzas, aka Cory, this is Curtis of Video Game Bang, and bye now.
Peace.